everybody, and welcome back to the channel Think Outside the Board. I am your host, Brian Toohey, and today I am bringing you a first impressions video for Whistle Mountain, which if you've been around my channel at all, you know that Whistle Mountain was my game of the month for January. So it's a game that I really like and I think is fantastic and amazing. It's a really good game. So this is a first impressions video, which means that it's not a full teach, it's not a full review. I probably will put one out in the future, but the reasoning for these videos is to try to get videos out as quickly as I can when a game is newly released or a Kickstarter is recently delivered. I am playing catch up a little bit, so something like Whistle Mountain is getting the first impressions treatment a little later, but after I've kind of played catch up with a few games that came out, October, November, December, I will only be concentrating these videos then on new stuff that is landing. But there are a few games like Whistle Mountain that I wanted to get a first impressions video out for. So I am going to show you how a lot of the mechanics work without giving you a full teach, to try to give you an idea of how the game plays and if it's a game for you more quickly than would happen during a full teach. And then I'm going to come back to this camera setup and I will give you my thoughts on it while not giving you a full review. So this is the board for Whistle Mountain. Now, this is not a game where I needed to show the insert. There is no insert. It's just everything in a box, which means lots of baggies for this game. Look at this. This is just the victory point baggie because you're going to be getting a lot of victory points in this game. So I didn't feel the need to show you the box or the insert since there really wasn't one, but I thought it would be of value to show you this board and the way it gets put together. So as you can see, the board actually comes in 4 pieces, and you're going to snap all 4 pieces together like so. And then you also have these two plastic pieces. There's a little bit of a notch here, which means that you're going to put it in like this, and part of the plastic will actually overhang. So these will get put here. And then you're going to have these water pieces, which there's a very long notch on the bottom part of these. So these will all go in here and sit in this. And then as the water level rises throughout the game, you'll take these pieces out and slot them in here, and you'll eventually start filling up this reservoir with all these water tiles. So it's just a cool little thing. I've never really seen anything quite like this before, but that is how that mechanism works. And I am going to set up the rest of this board, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about it. Okay, so we're back. I've got the main board set up. I also have a little player board set up, and I just wanted to show you basically the 3 kinds of airships in the game. There's like a balloon, a blimp, and I don't know what this is, a dirigible, I guess. 3 different sizes of balloons anyway. And these are the workers that you're going to be using to actually take worker placement spaces in this game, because it is really a worker placement game. And this is where they slot into the side of your player board. Now I'm going to talk about the main board first, and then I may actually just push it over a little bit so that I can talk about the player board. But in essence, on a turn, you're going to do one of 2 things. You're either going to place one of these ships out here somewhere on the board and take an action with it, or you're going to recall all your ships and build up to 3 things. So when you're taking these worker placement actions, it doesn't matter when you're going in the side pieces. You can use any of these pieces. They're all kind of interchangeable. But they will literally slot into the side of the board in these little notches. Those are the worker placement spaces. So if you're going here, you're going to pay 3 iron and 2 coal to buy one of these big, large tiles. If you go here, you're going to pay 3 iron to take one of these medium tiles. And if you go here, well, there's 2 different spots. There's one for 2 coal and one for 3 coal. But when you do that, you're going to buy one of those tiles. Now, you can also go get cards. If you go here, you're just going to take a card, and the cards are always face down, so you don't know what you're getting. There is a space here, but that's for the discard pile. You can also pay a resource which will allow you to draw 2 cards, or 2 resources, which will allow you to draw 3 cards. But these cards are generally going to be kind of all like one-time use things that will give you abilities and powers. You can also go here and buy one of these gears, and the cost of the gear is always on the top section. So this one is 3 water, that's 3 iron, and that's 3 gold. And then you'll slot them into one of these gear spots on your player board. Now, once they're in, you're in. So you can't exchange them later. You can't like unslot one to slot another one in. So as you build these, you're kind of slowly building your engine, which will give you different abilities that will strengthen your actions in the game. You can also go here and take a tile, or you can pay a candle and take 2 tiles, or pay 2 candles and take 3 tiles. These gridwork pieces are going to be what you're building here in this reservoir as you're building it up. You're going to accumulate all of these things, right? And that is one type of move that you can do. The other move is once these workers are at various places, and even if they're not, you can even do it when some of them are still here, you'll do a recall action, which brings your workers home, and then you can do up to 3 builds. And builds can be these tiles that you've accumulated on previous turns, or these tiles that you've accumulated on previous turns. Now at the top of the game, everyone will start with 2 of these scaffold pieces, and they'll go around during setup, and everyone will place 1 scaffold on the board. So like in a 4-player game, let's say scaffold pieces were built like this to start. Okay, so then when you recall your workers, you can either build more scaffolding, or you can build some of these tiles that you've bought during your other turns. The only rule with these scaffolding pieces is that they must touch at least one other section of scaffold. So I can't have it just hanging off in the air here. It has to at least be touching something. But as long as it is, I can place it any which way I want. Also, I'm going to immediately score victory points for any edges that are touching. So for instance, if I were to place this here as one of my builds, I would score victory points for that edge, that edge, that edge, that edge, and that edge, or 5 victory points for that placement. Now remember, you can do up to 3 builds on your turn. But as the player's board says, each additional build after your first is going to cost you a water. But maybe for another build, I want to build one of these machines. Now the rule on these machines is that they have to be placed completely on top of scaffolding. So for instance, this large machine could be built like that. Whenever I build something like this, if there are any workers that are out on the scaffold and the building gets built on top of them, they're going to move over to the part of the scaffolding that they're on. And then at the end of the game, this meeple would score 2 points. Also, the first person over here on each section of scaffolding will be able to claim the ribbon that is on that piece of scaffolding. And then later on a turn, they can activate it for a one-time ability. This one is just 6 victory points. This one is simply taking one of these tiles. But the first person there will gain this, and then at the end of the game, people will score victory points for all their meeples that are in this section. There are also abilities and things that allow your meeples to climb up. Now, the other interesting that happens with these meeples, if you ever had a meeple working here, when the water fills up, so for instance, when this tile comes up, this meeple is going to be kicked off the scaffolding into the whirlpool below. And this, at the end of the game, if you have any meeples here, that's a -5 points. Now, to get them out of here, again, on the player board, you can see during your build action, as a kind of bonus action, you can always pay 2 gold to rescue a worker from the whirlpool. You can also pay 1 gold to move a worker, and that is a way that you get these workers out onto the scaffolds so that later when you build machines, they'll be displaced over to the side for victory points. So those are the 2 kinds of builds that you can do. Now I'm going to go back here for a second because I was telling you earlier about all the different worker placement spots around the board. But you can also place these workers over here on this grid, and they can either go around the scaffolding. They can't go on the scaffolding, but they can go around it. And because they are different sizes, so you can see that has a base of 1 square, this one has a base of 2, and this one has a base of 3. There'll be a little variability in how you can place these. But in general, when you place them, you're going to gain any resources that you place next to, and you're going to activate any machines that you place next to or on. So for instance, this can be placed up here, and if I were to place it on the machine, I would activate the machine and I would get that gold. If I were to say place this over here, I'm going to get this coal, this gold, and this whistle. Hence the name, Whistle Mountain. Okay, so in general, it's a worker placement game, and you're going to be either taking the actions around the edge of the board to get various things, to build tiles, to gain resources, to upgrade your player board here with these gears, or you're going to be placing your workers in here to activate the machines, to do things, to run things, and also to gain more resources. Now, at a certain point in the game, the scaffolding will start to go over this line, this danger line. And every time a piece is built over this line, another one of these water tiles is going to advance. Now, once all of these meeples are gone from this area, which is called the barracks, meaning they've either crossed over here and are in scoring positions, or they're down here in the whirlpool. But once a player has had all of their meeples vacate this area, that will trigger the end of the game. At that point, you'll score points for all of your workers over here, plus all of the points that you've accumulated over the game for building the scaffolding or running machines. Sometimes those will get you victory points. And then the player with the most victory points will win. Now, if we take a little bit of a closer look at this player board here, everybody will get a couple of these roll tiles to begin at the start of the game, and they all have sort of asymmetric player abilities, and you're just going to slot them in this spot. And that'll give you a little bit of an engine right at the beginning of the game. And then as you play the game, as I've already described, you'll be buying these gears and slotting them in here, and you'll be creating a very different, diverse engine every game. Also, you can see here is your space for holding resources, and there is room for 5 of each type. So you've got water, you've got iron, gold, coal, and whistles. And whistles are basically a wild resource that you can use for any of the other things. Whistles are also the thing that you use to buy additional tiles when you're buying more than one at one time. Whether you're doing a collect action using these ships around the outside of the board or in the reservoir, or if you're doing the forge action where you recall them home and then are able to do builds, you can always, as a bonus on your turn, play these tiles that you've accumulated as one-time uses or play cards. So that's basically the structure of the game. You're going to be placing workers, you're going to be building this area up, you're going to be moving these meeples over to the side to score endgame points. You're going to be building up this engine on your player board, and you're going to be creating an insane network of these activation tiles, these machines that you'll then trigger with your ships, with your airships. It's a little bit fiddly with the water tiles and the way this comes out in these kind of plastic bars that set into the game board itself. But it's also genius. It's quite a brilliant game, and it allows you to build a very unique, very intricate engine every game, and there's just so much variability through all the different kinds of tiles in this game. Okay, welcome back. So that was Whistle Mountain, and as you can see, it is a tile fest. You've got 3 different kinds of tiles for the machines. You've got your small, medium, and large. You've got those gear tiles that slot into your player board to give you stronger and more varied asymmetric powers. You've also got that starting tile that slots into your player board to start the engine going. And then you've got all of those little scaffolding tiles that you're going to use to build things out. And you've got those water tiles that are slowly going to start to slot in over the course of the game, and the water level will rise. So there's a lot of tiles. It is much tile placement in this game. Also worker placement, right? And you've got your worker ships. And then you've got those little meeples, which aren't workers, but they will go out onto the scaffolding because they're crazy like that. And then they'll be displaced over to the sides, or maybe they'll eventually fall in that whirlpool. And the whole system with that scaffolding and the plastic pieces and the, those water tiles is very, very cool and very unlike anything I've really seen in a game before. So it is definitely got some interesting aspects to it. But beyond that, let's just talk about if the game is any good. It is fantastic. And I think the reason that it's so good is because of all those different tiles and all of the different variability they bring to the game. Now, your player board with that starting tile and the 6 gears, every time you play this game, you're going to create a very different engine that's going to give you all these additional bonuses and abilities, and it's going to make for very different gameplay within the gameplay of Whistle Mountain. And then with all the tiles that you can build, all those machines that you're building, again, the puzzle of the gameplay is going to be radically different every single game that you play. And it's just such a smart design. It's such a fun game to play. Moving those very tactile balloons and airships around is fun, and placing them on the board to activate resources and trigger the machines. Like later in the game, you'll build spaces maybe between scaffolding and between machines, and you'll be able to place those airships down either next to the machines or on top of them in ways that'll trigger sometimes 5, 6 machines at one time plus resources. So by the end of the game, you're going to be taking some pretty big involved turns that do a lot of things. And it is just sheer fun and sheer joy. Now, because of all that's happening on the board, Board Game Geek right now is rating this thing at a 3.11, which is solidly in the medium-heavy range, I think, without being quite in the heavy range. And it is kind of all front-loaded information. So once you play the game a few times and you start to learn the iconography and the way it works, it's going to feel less heavy, but I assume that's part of any game, right? So there is kind of a lot of stuff going on in the beginning, but the game itself is not that complex. Although I say this as a heavier gamer. So, I mean, to me, it wasn't that complex. It's just got a lot of moving parts to it, but it's really fun. It's really compelling. And I think if you take your time with it, kind of learning it, you'll get there. And there's so much cool stuff about this game. It is an excellent, excellent game. I think as long as you're not intimidated by it, I think it's a game that you'll really like. There's just a lot of good stuff in this one. So in closing here, let me just say thank you very much for watching. Thanks for your time. If you're new to the channel, you might want to consider subscribing down below. And you can always throw me likes. And if there's anything that you would like to ask me or talk about, you can leave comments in the comments section. Like, you could let me know if this is a game that you really want to hear more about. Maybe you want me to put out a full teaching review for this sooner rather than later. If that's the case, just let me know. I mentioned before, I did name it as my top game of January 2021. So if you're interested, you could go over and watch that video as well. And I talk more about it there. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.